Hello, everyone. Let me get the screen active here. Hello, welcome, everyone. This is Julie Teal with the Leadership and Retention Lab. Let me change my caption below. There we go. Welcome. I'm excited to discuss today relationships that lead to retention. If we've not met yet, my name is Julie Teal. I am the founder of Teal Talent Strategy. Our focus as a firm is helping professional services firms that are small to medium size address retention, build a culture so that as they grow, they can do that in a way that brings out the best in everyone on the team. So I'm delighted to be here with you today. A few of you might have tried to connect with me the last time when I did this. I'm delighted to say that the technology is up, it's working. And if you are tuned in, I'd love to have you say something in the chat. I can see those on the side here, and I'd love for you to say hello. What we're going to be discussing today is based on the retention model that I really reflected as I put this business together. What was it that made the biggest difference in whether employees really seemed to be engaged and productive and decided to stay versus firms I've worked with where it's just been more of a challenge? And what I came up with is what I call my growth model. So if you look here, this is the growth model. So these are the 6 factors that are absolutely critical for creating organizations that retain talent. And what I've been doing through these LinkedIn Lives and on my YouTube channel is we're going to be going through different pieces and parts of these topics. Today, the topic is the R's. You can see right there, the relationships, strong connections between managers and teams. So we're going to focus on that today, but as we go along, there's going to be other topics. And I think I've mentioned the last time that I am going to be inviting guests onto this show as well, because through my journey, I've met so many great leaders that are doing some really, really cool things around retention. And I'd love to get those in front of you and give them a chance to showcase what they're doing so well. So with that, I'll just jump in. So the most important thing we're going to cover, we'll back up here. I'm going to cover 4 topics today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of trust and how to build trust within an organization, because that is clearly a foundation for relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about holding consistent one-on-ones, because without that, you're not taking the time to connect with people, which makes it hard to have relationships. The third thing we're going to talk about is manager training, which is often, I think, something a lot of organizations miss. So we'll dive into that a little bit at a high level. And then my final thing, it may be a little bit of a rant, but stick around for it, is I know that when you look and talk about retention online or in organizations, everyone wants to blame the manager, and certainly managers have an important role in retention. But I want to talk a little bit, wow, I think that's a little unfair. So with that, I'm going to jump into the first topic. The first topic is trust. And as I start to talk about it a little bit, if you tuned in and want to make a comment, I'd love to hear how you define trust. What's your definition? I'm going to talk a little bit about trust, and then I'll get into the definition of it after I tell a little bit of a story or kind of make this first point. So the first point I want to make about trust and relationships is that oftentimes I hear people talk, and they'll talk about trust and they'll say, well, I believe my trust should be earned, not given. And I have a contrary opinion on that. So I wanted just to start with that being our foundation for talking about trust today, because I think certainly people do. I get the idea. People need to earn your trust. But trust to me is a decision. It's a decision to trust someone. And if it's not something that that person deserves, that will show itself. I don't need to go in skeptical. In fact, I am just a big believer, as you create organizations, create culture, you need to create cultures where there's the benefit of the doubt. And that is really when you make a decision to trust someone, to give trust, that is giving the benefit of the doubt. And that is something that I think is incredibly important when we're talking about how to build better relationships at work, especially if you're a leader. And it's important that you go first. I think a lot of people are waiting for other people to invest in trust, and I think leaders, executives, team leaders really need to be the ones that essentially go first and give trust to begin with. So that's my first point about trust. I'm going to build a little bit on what I'm seeing are the comments and definitions of trust that are coming through. I see things about consistency. I see this idea of doing what you say you're going to do, which is a critical part of trust. So those types of factors certainly are part of the definition and how I look at trust. I think there's also a level of care and concern and safety that goes with trust. I have to feel safe that when I rely on someone or I share information with someone, that it's going to be held and treated in the way I would want it to be treated, that information or those actions that I'm expecting. So all of those factors go into building trust and being intentional about building trust in the workplace. So the other thing that I'll build on that is that trust is something that gets deeper and deeper over time. So as we talked about, I believe you should give and invest in trust and make the decision to trust someone. And then over time, that continues to evolve. And the more time you spend with someone, so when someone is in passing, the things that we often take for granted, those small hellos, those little texts that say, "How are you doing today?" Those Slack messages that are more just kind of checking in on people's weekends. Those things really seem small, but in the scheme of things, that is how that consistency over time happens. And that's how you really start to build trust with people. And then the last point I'll make about trust is a key component of building trust is being a good listener, is having those listening skills. And what's so hard about listening, though, is whether you're in a professional services firm, and I know that environment, they tend to be pretty intense. You're on deadlines, you're on billable hours. And so it can be really difficult sometimes to slow down and really listen when someone's talking to you. We tend to be a little bit more about the outcomes and execution. But what I encourage you to do, and I want every time we do these, I want you to walk away with some sort of action that you can take. And the action I want to leave with you on the topic of trust is to really be conscious of your listening skills. So many of us, and I do this too, I'm certainly not perfect, will be listening to someone while we're preparing what we're going to say next. And when you're doing that, when you're really again, taking it in, but then immediately going to what am I going to say next, you do lose the content of what someone's saying. And I really encourage you to take the time to pay attention to that inner thought process that's going on with you, on whether you really are listening to what someone has to say or if you're listening to share. And those are very different ways of listening. Another important skill with listening is reflecting back and framing what you've heard. So that is a way to show someone that you're really listening, and is a really, really great way to start building trust with someone. So when you're listening to what someone has to say, pause and say, "Well, I think I heard you say this." And in your own words, say what you thought you heard. And what that does is that gives the other person a chance to respond and say, "Yes, you've got that right," or no, I meant this. I mean, so it's really important for making sure you understand the meaning of what someone's saying. In addition to that, sometimes it's even helpful to name the emotion that you're seeing in the person as a way of confirming what you're hearing. So another way to do that was, it sounds like you found that really frustrating. Again, that's a way to reframe what you're naming the emotion, or repeating back what you heard the person say. So that is an action around building trust, which is a core element of building relationships that I'd love to leave with you today as part of this discussion we're having. I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is having consistent one-on-ones. And as I'm talking through one-on-ones a little bit, I'd love for you to put in the chat. And again, I'll keep an eye out over here. See me look over here. I'm looking at the chat. If you could put in whether or not you have consistent one-on-ones with your leader today. So, it's basically a one-on-one is just a meeting with you and your manager that's on some consistent basis. When someone's new, or depending on the type of job, that could be weekly. I'm a big fan when someone's up to speed and they have kind of they're reasonably experienced person. You probably don't need to do it every week, and can probably be every other week. Or even with very experienced people, sometimes that can be every 3 to 4 weeks. So I don't have I'm not hardcore, it has to be every week, but it has to be something that's predictable and repeated. And here's why: we all need time. Again, trust is built over time and through spending time together. And it's nearly impossible to build a relationship with someone you don't see regularly or spend time with. So I think that same principle that you use outside of work around building relationships is what you need to use when you're building relationships within the workplace. So here are a few tips I have about one-on-ones and things that you can reflect on to say, am I doing this or am I not? I think the first thing about having really good one-on-ones that have depth and substance that are really worth the time are, first of all, preparation. So one of the things that, because if you go into the conversation without a plan, it's really hard for that to be a great experience, either for you or for whether you're a manager or the employee. I mean, you got to have a little bit of a plan. So one of the things, there's a number of ways you can do that. Certainly one of the things I have done when I've been a leader is I've asked before a one-on-one to send me a list of topics that they have to discuss. If I have something I have to discuss, sometimes I'll give a preview of that as well. The other thing I would do sometimes is I would open up, I'd have my meeting, plan to meet with someone at this time. I'd put another meeting notice by it private to me where I'd keep notes on what I wanted to talk about. Because sometimes in the busyness of day to day, it's like, I have something I need to talk about. It's not urgent. I don't need to text the person or kind of pull them aside right away, but it's something I need to talk to them about. I'll kind of earmark that in my discussion additional meeting notice. So there's a number of ways to prep to have a really productive one-on-one. And I'd love to hear it. If you've got other things you do to prepare for one-on-ones, I'd love to hear that in the chat as well. The other thing that I really encourage you to do, which, again, historically, I have been I'm a goal-oriented, focused person. I know a lot of you are as well. So it's easy when you get into a one-on-one to be like, let's talk about the project. Let's talk about the goals. Let's talk about those things right away. And what I have found useful and helpful is to start the one-on-one a little bit differently. Start by having just a personal conversation. I know a great thing that you can do the rest of this week is be like, what are your Labor Day plans? How is back to school going? If your employee or peer has kids, there's just ways, just start the meeting with some personal connection. And it gives you the platform then to little by little over meeting with the person regularly to be like, oh, I remember you. Like in my case, my daughter just started college at Bemidji State. I'm so excited for her. I miss her, but it's really exciting for her to be in college now. But if I were to have a one-on-one, that would be a great question. How's your daughter doing in college? How are you doing with being an empty nester now? Those types of conversations are small. It can be 5 minutes or less, but it gives you a way of connecting and having that connection and that relationship be the foundation for everything else you're talking about within the projects and other things you're trying to accomplish. And here's why that's important. I think that on one hand, if people feel supported, which is what a good one-on-one does, they feel better taking risks. They feel they're more able to, I think there's better execution. People feel comfortable and confident that the direction they're going is the right direction, and they'll put full effort into following through. And I think in addition to that, they're more likely, if something's not going well, if we have a relationship and I felt safe to you talking to you about smaller things, if there's a bigger issue, you are more likely to hear about it in the one-on-one if there's a relationship that's been built, which puts everybody in a better position to solve problems and for you to really understand what's going on within your team and in the organization and to set it up for success. So that's another piece that I think is really important about one-on-ones and why they're so important. So in addition to that, I'll give you a little bit of what's like extra credit for one-on-one. So if you're really an overachiever, which I know some of you are, I encourage you on a periodic basis, whether this could even just be once or twice a year, but to hold a one-on-one that's purely about employee development. And if you know me, you know over the years, I've been really embedded in learning and development, career development, talent management, succession planning, all of those things. And career development really begins with a really open conversation between an employee and a manager about their career goals, about their aspirations, and even about, to some extent, their life stage, because at different points in your life, different aspects of career growth sound attractive or not, but you can't assume that for any given person. Those decisions on whether, again, when I had a baby, my objective for my career adjusted a bit while my daughter was young, because I needed to be home more. I wanted to be home more. So that did inform my career decisions, but that's not going to be true for every woman or every person. So a real honest conversation about, hey, how's your career going? Are there projects you'd like to get involved with? Is there a different type of work or job or client that you want to get into? Are you interested in a certain area of technology that you'd like to go deeper? There are so many ways to have a career-based discussion with someone. And I think sometimes lots of times we have assumptions about what people want. And until you have the conversation, you just don't know. So that's the other part that I think is, again, if you're extra credit. We'll talk more about development conversations in the future, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk about it as part of the importance of regular one-on-ones. So get that cadence scheduled. And I'm telling you, if you're an employee and you're not having that from your manager, ask. Let them know you need it, you want it, it's going to benefit both of you, and go ahead and schedule it. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Take matters into your own hands. You don't have to wait for the leader to initiate if that's something that's important to you and something that's missing. And I would encourage everyone to do that. So moving on to the third topic we were going to talk today, it's about manager training. And I am amazed at how many great organizations go light on training their leaders. It's kind of assumed that people will either kind of the deep end of the pool experience where you're a new manager, will just throw you in and you can figure it out as you go, which some people are able to do, but not everybody. And even if you do that, you're leaving relationships to chance, because most leaders only are able to, in many cases, do what they've had done for them. So they are going to model and kind of match what their managers have done. And that may be a great thing, that may be a great practice, or that may not. And when you offer management training to an organization, what that does, and when I say management training, I know I could be saying leadership training, but I'm really talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of management. How do you set goals? How do you give feedback, either positive or negative? How do you coach and develop high performers, experienced middle of the road performers that are awesome, that are probably the core of your business? How do you develop them? How do you develop people that are struggling or earlier in their career? So giving people the tools to be able to do that, in addition to how do you reduce conflict in the workplace? How do you run a team meeting? All of those things, I think we take for granted that leaders know how to do. Now, a lot of leaders do figure it out, right? So some leaders do figure it out and are great at it somewhat naturally because of who they are, and they will put personal effort into those types of training activities, or they'll read books or seek out different types of leadership training themselves. But if an organization can set a standard where everyone gets some minimum of training and experience and guidance in those areas, the benefits are huge, because then that will help you across all aspects of meeting your goals and making sure you've got leaders in place that really are, not only the leaders are enjoying the experience, but their teams are really growing and developing together. So I don't think it's smart to skimp on that, because you're leaving, I think, the goals and execution of your organization a chance when you do that. So finally, again, this is where maybe I'm a little controversial on this. I don't know, but every time you talk about retention and the employee engagement, it often lands firmly, the blame for that being good or bad firmly lands on the manager. So the manager is either doing a great job of retaining talent or a poor job of retaining talent. And that's a little bit of the evaluation you get often in engagement surveys. Is the person good or bad? So it's kind of like a yes or no on the evaluation. And here's why I think that is a bit unfair, and I take exception to that conclusion. Is that organizations are systems, and they're systems that either reward behavior or, in some cases, punish or at least discourage certain behaviors. And you really have to take a look at an organization or even a team, because even teams or locations sometimes can have cultures that are unique to themselves. And we often do what has been presented to us and what's been encouraged. So I don't think it's fair. Like, a leader exists within the system. So if a leader is not successful, I think you need to take a look at what has the organization done to help that leader be successful and to retain talent, and what is happening in the broader picture of the organization. Workload dynamics, client dynamics. You have to take a look at team dynamics. All of those things really can factor into whether a leader is successful or not, and whether a team is thriving or not. Even things like rewards. Has pay been addressed? Is there competitive pay? All those things, again, work together to either help elevate a leader or help encourage behaviors that are not so productive from a leader. So I think that's an important point to take a look at the whole system. And in addition, sometimes there are things that are important to people that impact whether they stay or go that have nothing to do with the leader. Lots of times it can be they may be at a life stage where the flexibility that's provided by the company is really what keeps them. It's not necessarily what the leader's doing, or it's the purpose of the organization. There's many mission-driven organizations are able to retain great talent and can do that because there's such a belief in the impact and the mission of the organization. So I just want to say, again, that's why there are 6 factors to retaining talent. I didn't just have one, and you'll notice I have relationships is the factor that matters. So that relationship, that good relationship that keeps people, that may be with a peer, that may be with a mentor, that may be with other people. Again, organizations are systems, and this doesn't just solely fall on the manager to either do it well or do it poorly, and then you're at the mercy of that when it comes to retaining talent. So take a look at the system, not just the person, and that will, in some cases, give you a little different frame on what might be going on within any given part of your organization. So that's my main content. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll just talk a little bit about some of the work I do and how we can work together. So one of the reasons I do this, it gives you a little bit of a feel of what it's like to talk with me and chat with me. These are the types of conversations I have with leaders all the time, which is what inspired me to do this for a bit of a broader audience. So I'm just so delighted to be doing this. So the ways that you can work with me is certainly to reach out to me and have a conversation. We can chat about struggles you're having either with retention or with, in many cases, the small to medium-sized businesses I work with already have great cultures. Retention isn't an issue, but as they're looking to grow and add new people into the mix, often that's where things can break down with translating the culture you have today at this size to the culture you're going to have at a much bigger size. And I love getting into those issues and working with organizations that are growing and helping them set themselves up for that culture of retention in the long run. I can also work fractionally. So that is another thing that I've been engaging and working with leaders to set up. So those are all things that I can do in order to help, but it all starts with a conversation, and I'm open to do that at any time. On my LinkedIn profile, you'll see a link to schedule time with me. And if you're on YouTube, find me on LinkedIn, and that's a great way to schedule with me right now. My website is almost done and should be launched soon. So I don't see any questions now, but I want to thank you all for coming to this live stream. Thank you for being part of the Leadership and Retention Lab community, and I'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Have a great day.